Hey, namaste, I'm Kay, this is Ecstatic Self. Today I want to introduce an idea, and that idea is suffering, pain. Ooh, what a glorious topic to talk about. Now, many of you have probably heard the phrase, life is suffering, and that is an extrapolation on the first of the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, which is, if you are born into this world, you are going to endure pain, discomfort, and suffering. It's unavoidable. Maybe if we lived on a different planet or in a different realm, suffering would not be so much a thing, but here on Earth, in this time, in this place, it very much is. And it's inescapable. But none of us really like the experience of pain, and many of us, I would say even all of us, spend much of our life force trying to avoid it, trying to run from it, trying to insulate ourselves from discomfort. And we do it in a lot of different ways, right? We could do it by trying to have the perfect body so then people don't reject us, or so that we don't get sick. We can do it by trying to hoard money in the bank, and that prevent us from experience poverty and the discomfort of feeling like we're lacking. But ultimately, no matter what we do, pain is still going to come, suffering is still going to come. We are never going to be able to outrun it. And accepting that is a very important thing. In one of my other videos, I talk about this idea of how pain and suffering are not entirely the same thing, right? Like, you will experience pain. Whether or not you suffer because of it, that's your choice. And that's where yogic disciplines and meditative disciplines come in, is so that you can work to separate the pain from the suffering and let go of the suffering. But that's not what I'm talking about in today's video. What I want to talk about is why we avoid pain so much. And for me, it boils down to one thing. We are all fundamentally creatures of bliss. Let me say that again. You, in your truest, deepest, most interconnected state, is a creature of immense bliss. And if you think about it, bliss is actually the first feeling our cells knew. Back when we were zygotes, back when we were just one little tiny, tiny cell, when the sperm and ova met, for most of us, at least those of us conceived in the traditional method, our forebearers, our parents, were in an act of copulation. And for most people, copulation is a really pleasurable act. And of course, not everybody has a pleasurable experience of sex, and not everybody who's conceived is conceived in a pleasurable act of sex. Sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's traumatic. But by and large, the act of procreation is enjoyable. I've shared in other videos how some yogic and meditative traditions actually call that fourth state of consciousness, that turiya state, that meditative high, they actually call it the same state as an orgasm. So our cells are conceived from that state. That the very first feeling our cellular being knew was pleasure, was bliss. And that is our home. I think all of us so desperately seek pleasure and avoid pain in our life because that's who we truly are inside. A lot of different spiritual traditions describe the intrinsic quality of the self, and one of my favorite definitions of the intrinsic quality of yourself and your soul that I've come across is one called Satchitananda. Satchitananda is actually an amalgamation of three different words. The third one, Ananda, means bliss. One of the three principal aspects of who you truly are at your essence is a being of pleasure, a being of bliss. This is why sex is good. This is why self-pleasuring and masturbation are good. This is why eating your favorite food is good, and going for walks and spending time in nature is good, and cuddling is good, and all of these things. And this is why, I'm not somebody who says to be spiritual means to reject the world or to become celibate or to avoid having sex, because all of this is an expression of our truest self. It's an expression of joy, of our innate nature, of bliss. It's who we really are. These things that you do that you really enjoy draw us back to that state of truth, of consciousness, of bliss. Sat, Chit, Ananda, truth, consciousness, and bliss. And that's why pain feels so foreign, because it's in a lot of ways the antithesis, right? We want to avoid pain and move back to pleasure. Now, the ironic thing is the more that we try to do it externally, the more we try to fix our life to insulate ourselves from pain, the more pain we actually create. And the ironic thing is, as we lean into pain, as we lean into the discomfort and say, hey, I'm going to allow myself to feel it, but I'm not going to suffer. I'm just going to experience the pain. The more the pain falls and the more the pleasure rises. And you can even see this in a very superficial way. And I mean superficial as in on the surface, not like it's lacking substance. It's just not quite, is with BDSM culture, right? Like pain and pleasure go hand in hand. And I say superficial just because I'm not talking about necessarily, though it could be deep spiritual truths, but definitely it could, depends on your vantage. But this idea, if we lean into our discomfort, if you do that thing that makes you uncomfortable, a lot of times it will actually make you experience deeper bliss. So you have that difficult conversation with your partner. You admit that thing about yourself you never wanted to admit it. You eat your vegetables, you go to the gym, you do these things that aren't in the moment, don't feel so good, but the payoff is that ultimately it brings you back to that state of pleasure. Because pain and pleasure are opposite sides of the same coin. Something that brings you pleasure in a moment could give you pain later on, and vice versa, right? Like start eating ice cream, really pleasurable. You keep eating, keep eating, keep eating. You've finished a whole gallon and suddenly it's not pleasurable anymore. It's actually very painful, and vice versa, right? That thing that started off being a real drudge, a real dirge, like a funeral march, ended up giving you a lot of pleasure. Like my childhood, getting bullied so much, very painful at that time. But it ultimately made me into the happy, really awesome feeling man that I am now. So we are creatures of bliss. We avoid pain because we know our true nature is bliss. But if you keep seeking it on the external level, outside, you'll never truly, truly find it. Instead, we have to turn within and cultivate bliss on the inside and embrace the suck, embrace the pain. Well, that's a little bit of a tantric philosophy for you in a very brief amount of time. I hope that's helpful. I'm Kay. This is Ecstatic Self. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment. Enjoy. Have a beautiful day.